Wind here with another video. This was a request by Simen, so thank you so much for the inspiration. I love hearing from you guys, so please do add any comments or any videos you want to see. So in today's video, we're going to go over kind of best practice for update sets, and essentially some of the rules I put into a quick knowledge article just to kind of showcase some of the suggestions or best practices I've experienced when working with update sets, and how you could easily deploy them using kind of the parent-child, or what we call batching update sets, into a parent update set. So let's go over the article, and as we go over some points, I might do some demonstrations of what this kind of would look like, and so on and so forth. So let's get into it. So this is best practices for handling ServiceNow update sets. So it's essential to maintain system integrity as you move it up the stack, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And just having that seamless migration, so it's consistent through the stack, i.e. your dev, test, and your production, which is your normal stack. Usually, you might also have a staging instance and a dev2 instance, but usually it'd be that 3-tier stack essentially. Okay, so first things first is plan and organize your update sets. So group related changes per story. That's the first thing I would say, is whatever story you're working on, always have an update set for a particular story. So if you're working on another story, that should be another update set, and that just allows us to keep the changes to that requirement very specific and into one update set. If you do have an update set, or do have changes that span over different scopes, it is good to also keep the same name in terms of the story number, but possibly change the product shorthand, which we'll get to in a moment, and then essentially you could batch them up if required. So the second point is the naming convention. So use clear descriptive name for update sets. What I've used in the past, or currently using as well, is initially we would start off with the developer initials. Now that might sound a bit odd, but when you're working with a massive team, it makes it very easy to just work out, if you get to a point where you're deploying an update set and there was an error, that name, that update set name, knowing who those initials are, very quickly you can go and speak and consult to that developer just to ensure what the changes are, and consult with them, and we'll go into managing those kind of issues further down the line. But developer initials, again, this is not strict. It's up to you if you want to use them or not. But one example I've used a lot and still use. So developer initials, and then the product shorthand. So if you're using like ITSM or change, problem, anything that kind of shows what the update set might be touching is always a nice thing to have, just for visibility. Story number is essential, I would say, and then version number. Now, usually if you're working with multiple changes, then you would need to modify stuff. It's always best to do another update set and add it in later. So you might have fix 1, fix 2, and we'll go into that in a second, or version 1, version 2. Right, so that's naming convention for update sets. I would also say there should be a naming convention for batch update sets. So when you create your parent, and we'll go over that in a moment, but when you create your parent, usually what I've used is you would have your merge parent, just to kind of make it very clear this is a merge parent update set. Possibly the release number or the change number, whichever depicts why you're batching this, because usually you batch it before a release or deployment. You could batch it if it's a project, and then you might put the project name. So it depends on what your reason for batching is, but it will be always nice to highlight what are the merged update sets, so you're aware that's the one you want to essentially export or push up, and I'll show what that looks like as well. Avoid overloading. So try best not to include too many unrelated changes in a single update set. So if you are working on something and then you go and work on something else, just ensure that you move out of that update set, because if you add in unnecessary changes that are not part of that story, it could cause issues, and then you basically going back and trimming it and whatnot. So always try and have that kind of practice in, is whenever you move to a new story, or you stop working, just get out of that update set so you don't add any more changes into it. Okay. So let me just quickly show what that kind of naming convention would look like. So I've created two update sets just to showcase this. So we have one here that has the story number, my initials, and change, because we've done some changes on a particular change management CAD workbench application, and then version 1 just to showcase. So we can see there's 3 updates in this. Essentially I would add a description just explaining, these are the changes related to change XYZ. You could also just copy the short description of the story, just give any little information, so it helps the admin or whoever's releasing this to very quickly know exactly what this update set is doing without having to go into the story. So it just adds a little bit more friendly user experience. Okay, and then we have a second update set, which is essentially the ITSM product. As you can see here, we got the story number, the initials of the developer, and version 1 as well. And you see this one has changes to the instant form, so very quickly know, okay, so they're changing the form layout. I could look at custom updates, makes sense. So that also helps, because if you got something in custom updates very quickly and see, wait, that's not right, that doesn't help the description, I can call that out. So that's essentially the naming of the update sets, just to showcase that. Now, using a parent-child update set structure. So for large projects, or even if you're looking to release, it does help to put it into a parent update set. So I do want to show what that looks like. So I'm going to right now just create a merge parent update set. So essentially you just create update set as you normally would. I'm going to keep it into application global. Now it's up to you. You can leave it global. I would say global is best. You can put it any other application, because really it just acts as parent, and it will batch all the update sets underneath it, or children, regardless of its application. So it's really good just to kind of be able to group that. But I would always say global would be the best, but it's not really necessary. It wouldn't affect anything if you don't. Okay, so so I'm gonna call it merge parent, and then I'm just gonna put some like release 001 as an example, and that's essentially it. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to submit this. So you don't need to make it current, because all we're going to do now, if I go back to my update set, I'm just going to copy this, and essentially in the parent field here, okay, right, parent field here, I'm just going to add our parent update set. Now over here you'll see it's read only, because I'm not in the right scope. So if I just click there, I will be able to then update it. However, I do want to point out one thing. When you click on that record there, be very careful when you make any development changes, because if you do that, it will kind of capture in a default update set. So if you do need to make a change in a different scope, it's always best just to create a new update set in that scope to ensure you don't miss out any changes. So I hope that makes sense. So right now, if I just refresh this list, what you will see here is we have the merge parent added to these. I will also add another one, because these are completed already by me. So I'm going to add this one as well, just to showcase what occurs when I essentially, okay, let me just add that into the form. So okay, go. Okay, so back in the update sets, just refreshes. Okay, so we can see these 3 update sets are essentially in, one's in progress. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to complete this update set, right? So this will complete all update sets in the batch. So whatever is update sets in the batch, i.e. the child update sets, it will complete them if you complete the parent one. So let's say I complete this. If it's already complete, it's fine. There's no issues. But just to be very clear here, if you do have it in progress, it will complete them. So now, as you can see here, I have all the parent update sets. Essentially, if I was to go into, let's say, a child update set, you can see I cannot export it. I can only export the parent. Right? So when I export the parent, and I push this in, it would allow all these changes to occur. So I'm going to export So I will showcase this in a moment, but essentially that's how you would batch an update set. So let's go to the other points, because I think at the end is when I will show a demonstration of exporting this and pushing this in, but also showcasing a conflict as well. So the third point, minimize dependencies. So sometimes it's hard to avoid, but if you can minimize dependency between update sets to prevent failures during deployment, it's best if you could. If you can't, it's always good or best practice to document the dependencies clearly. So there's a few ways you can do this, but if you go to essentially a story, you do have, so there's an example story. You can see here that there is a dependent story, so I can add, if I click edit, I can add stories that I say are dependent, and that's one way to essentially know. Now that just tells me, there's a story that's dependent, so let me just add this as an example. But additionally, you could also create a Scrum task. If you agree with your team, something like release instructions. And this really helps because essentially it could be to ensure that the order is correct. So you could put instructions, ensure story 2 goes first as an example. But additionally, if there are any manual activities, then you could essentially name them here. So import XML as an example, X, Y, Z. And if we basically just, so you could change the type, which is always nice. Complete this. Okay, so if we scroll down, I've got a Scrum task here. So whoever's doing deployment, what they could easily do is look at all the stories. If they have any Scrum tasks that start with release instructions as a short description or some sort of short acronym, then essentially they could see all the documentation steps and just add that into their release plan. So that's one of the things in terms of adding documentation when we're talking about dependencies. Point 4, avoid default update sets. So always create and use named update sets. Any changes made in default update set can lead to accidental overwriting, and it's also just not great for consistency because you could multiple developers could be using the default update set. It could have many records, so you really don't want to use that. If you do find you have made an update in a default update set and it's one custom update and you just want to move that across, there is a way to do it in ServiceNow, which is quite simple, rather than recreating the change into the right update set. Let's say if I go to the global default update set, see I have one of these updates and I want to add them to a different update set. What I could do here is change this update set to the update set I want it to be in. So for example, if I just add it to let's say merge parent as an example, and I save this, right, if I go back now, I go to my merge parent, I can see the customer update is in the merge parent. So that's a quick way to add it to the required update set if you do happen to make a mistake and have it in a default update set or a different update set that it shouldn't be in. So hopefully that helps. Perform regular updates. So ensure that your update set is current by previewing and committing it regularly in development environments. Resolve conflicts when properly when they occur. I do have a point around managing conflicts, so we'll go into that, but essentially when you move them up, ensure they are up to date, so you are previewing them and committing them essentially on each instance, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Test thoroughly before migration. So I mean, when you deploy update sets to a test environment, ensure it works in a test environment. Just have a quick smoke test to ensure that what it says it does on the tin or what the custom updates are are basically the same as what it was in development, because it always just helps just to be sure, just in case there is something blocking it that's not pointed out right away. You could have an update set go in and say there's no issues, and then somehow it doesn't seem to work because there's something's blocking it on that instance. So always check that. Coordinate with team members. So it depends on how big your team is, but if you do have different team members doing different activities, i.e. pushing it to test and pushing it to deployment, having clear structure of how you document certain things and where to look is always good. Using team development to streamline collaboration is also great, and that can be another video because there's a lot to do with team development, and if it's something you want to watch, let me know. But yeah, there's a lot you could do just to ensure you're coordinating with your team. And one could be using Scrum tasks just to show kind of those release notes and what someone would have to do when they push up a specific update set or your update set. Okay. So when you're managing missing or excluded updates, always use the compare to current tool to resolve discrepancies between the source and the targets. And just review for missing updates. That should be part of the migration. So if you're looking at the updates, customer updates and tests, and they don't align with the customer update numbers in production, it would be good just to find out, has there been any changes, what's caused that. So always some good sanity checks just before you push it up, essentially, the implementation or configuration or development. If you can, avoid large data set migrations. So update sets are not ideal for moving large amounts of data. Best practice would be to use mechanisms like export sets or integration tools. So you could import data using a import set and transfer map, or you could load data via an integration. However, if you are moving update set data, definitely try not to do it via XML. It is very quick and it could be great. However, you don't get any transparency when you move data via XML. So I would then say, if you do need to do it, and export sets or integration tools are not a choice that you could do, or a method you could provide for whatever reason, then using update sets to do that is great, but just be wary. It's not built for that, but it is possible. And there is one of the videos I've shown in how you would do that, yeah, I'll put it on the recommendation list so you can check that out. Okay, point 10, keep track of your update set status. So ensure that update sets are moved through environments in the correct order. So usually, and it depends on your company or your instant infrastructure, but usually there will be an order to your stack. So you do development in a development instance. Once it's developed and peer reviewed, you essentially move it into a test environment. That is where you have your UAT, user acceptance testing, and your testing stakeholders and testers to verify it's working as expected before it then goes into production. Always ensure that update sets are marked as complete after they're fully tested and ready for migration. So in development, once you've built it and it's been peer reviewed, before you move it to test, you complete that. Essentially in test, once it's past testing, you complete that. So just always ensure it's completed once those activities or crucial activities are done. Avoid changing update sets that are incomplete to in progress, because any additional changes added, and depending on the tool you're using to pull the update sets, because you could import the update set manually by exporting and then importing the XML, or you could be using tools like Remote Instance, which is a great tool, I would say, because it allows you to determine which instance you would pull from, just providing that consistency. If you do pull a complete update set, going forward, when you pull complete update sets, it would essentially miss out any changes in that complete update set. So it does depend how you do it, but I would always ensure best practice is try not to move it back to in progress. If you do need to do any fixes, again, we use those naming conventions like version 2, version 3 to just ensure that we have those fixes right after, complete those and pull them as separate update sets. And again, when we batch them, it'll be one, so don't worry about it going too much. Sometimes there are changes that go back and forth with the user, but it's essentially at one point you'll only have to push the parent update set. Okay. Audit changes, so regularly review the content update sets to ensure that only necessary changes are included. So when we say regularly, I would always say just before you're going to complete it, after a crucial activity, just have a quick sanity check. If there's no custom updates that's been added by accident, just ensure everything is there that you expected to be there. Any unnecessary changes or unwanted system records, you basically just want to remove those customer updates. And the way you could do that very quickly. So if I just refresh this, let's say if I look at this one, I don't really want this update here, so I can just go and delete that. Now it's not going to delete the configuration itself, as long as you ensure you're looking at the customer updates here. This will ensure that it's just removed from this update set. So if I remove this, the change still exists, it just has ensure that it's not part of this update set. As an example, you could always just move it back to default as well if you're not comfortable with just deleting that record there, but also that means that update has been deleted, so I wouldn't be able to now check that. Yeah, just an example. Also, just while we're at it, you could always go into deleted records if you do make a mistake, and you could always go to, if it will find it. I just use it as an example, but it would normally be here, and you can just undelete with related, or so that will ensure that it just undeletes the records if you do make a deletion error. So just another quick tip there. Okay, so where were we? So we were at, I think, 12.12, so backup before committing. So it's always good to ensure you have a backup of the environment of the change before you're going to commit into that next instance. However, if you do follow step 10 and move them through the environment stack, this would allow you to ensure you always have an instance where you could re-import. So for example, if you move it to dev into testing, and there's an issue that happens on testing, you'd always pull the configuration via the XML or export from production. Hopefully you would have a staging instance, so you could always pull it from there. So it's always great to have kind of four, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you only have those three. But yeah, sometimes it does help just to back up some of the things you think might go wrong. Just in case they do, you could import them back. You could always back out, but sometimes they're not super great, so sometimes I call them more issues than anything. I always would say fixing forward is sometimes the best way forward, but yeah, just a point there. Using ServiceNow best practices. So there is a lot of documentation and training on the Now platform or Now community as well. And Now Learning. There are tools like remote instances to streamline deployment process and team development. So I would always say check those out because they're really good in just ensuring that you have that. I will quickly show what remote instances look like, but because I don't have another instance, I can't show exactly how it works, but I'll try my best to explain it. So with remote instances, you could essentially create a remote instance. So let's say PDI test, and essentially I will put in the URL of the test environment, a username and password that connects the two. This should always kind of be the local admin account, to be fair, and then essentially you would submit it. So what this will allow you to do is to be able to pull all the update sets from that particular instance. So on tests, so imagine if this was a test environment, actually we would pull from dev, so you'd always just pull from the stack. So you'd name it PDI dev, you'd have dev instance, and then when you create the connection, you will then be able to pull all completed update sets, and then from that you can then manage your conflicts. And what's really great is if you use this tool, and then let's say now we are pulling from our production instance, so we're currently in a production instance, we've created a remote instance for PDI test, and we pull from test. Any changes or conflicts that you've already gone through, like skipped and reviewed, it will remember that from that previous stack, and it will automatically do them. So when you pull them, preview them, it will do that. Now you could always preview again, and then it will cause those issues, so you could if you do want to double check them, you could do that. But yeah, this helps so much. And then the other way is obviously just importing them manually, which is something we'll do in a moment just to showcase this. Right. Okay, so 14, managing conflict issues. So this is where I just wanted to show a quick demo. So if you do arrive at a conflict or warning, and we talked about this in previous points, is the first thing to do to compare to current. Just understand what are the changes and what's expected. If you're not the developer, then I would always say to consult with the developer of the story, just to ensure that whatever action you're making is what the expected outcome was. It's always great to get a consultation before you actually make the change. Okay. Now each issue may be unique and should be dealt one by one. So there's some general rules that can be used 8% of the time, but 20% could be exceptions. So I'd always make sure you do it one by one and just ensure. But one example is if you find a local update newer than this one, so one of the most common warnings, and we'll see if we can replicate that in a moment. Most likely the recent change is the one you should retain, unless there was an exception. So it's still always best to check what the difference between the record is and what the expected outcome. But one example of, there are some rules that you could kind of establish that will always kind of help you get to a decision, but you should always check one by one just in case that doesn't apply. So I'm going to see if I can show you how we can manage conflicts or issues, just to showcase that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to essentially export this parent update set. Let me just refresh this one more time. Okay, so I'm going to export this parent update set. Okay, and that's just downloaded. So I'm going to leave that there for now. So let me just go back. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go to the incident form, which I essentially did make a form layout change. Okay, sorry, let me just go back to a record actually and just do it here. So essentially what I did is I moved this priority up above from its usual layout, which is below urgency. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move it back. So I'm doing this in essentially a default update set. Okay, I'm not, so I want it to be default actually. And I'm just going to refresh this page. Okay, so now that I'm here, essentially I'm going to take priority and I'm just going to move it down. Save this. Okay, and we can see priority is down. So now what I want to do actually, because I've got the update set, I'm actually going to delete this parent update set. And let's just go back to update sets quickly. Okay, and also I'm just going to delete essentially these as well. Okay, so let me try and, because I'm probably not in the right scope to delete them, so okay, so I just need to change my scope quickly. So yeah, so while we're here, just show how you can quickly change the scope. So you go to the top right there, change the scope, and then let's just go and delete this one. Am I in the right scope? Should be, yes. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not letting me delete it, but that's fine. So I just want to show, let's see if I can commit the parent and let's see what happens. So going to import XML. Okay, let's go to downloads. Let's get our update set. Load that. Okay, now whenever you upload something manually like I did, it will always first go into a table called retrieve update sets. So let's just go to that. So only once you commit them would they go to our local update sets. So over here we can see our retrieve update sets, and we can see these have been loaded. So because I loaded the parent, as you've seen, it's loaded the batch update sets as well as the different applications. So this is what I mean by parent and child. As you can see, we only had to export one, but it's loaded all of them. And over here now, our preview update set. Now I'm hoping there should be a conflict. There isn't one, which is unfortunate because I thought I did change the instant form layout. But let's just commit that. Okay. So if I just go to incident. Okay, so I was hoping it would have actually pulled out an error to say there's a local update that's been created, but as you see, it didn't, and as a result, it just moved up priority. So sometimes the system doesn't provide a warning, so it's always good just to check what the changes are, do that sanity checks. But I hope that's helped give quite a few pointers on how to use update sets and how to batch them, naming conventions, and just kind of how we move it up the stack. So please let me know if you have any further questions on this. I hope this has helped. Thank you. Bye.